Welcome to Webinar Wednesday, the inaugural event with Microsoft PowerPoint MVP, Ellen Finkelstein. She's going to take us through how to dramatically improve our PowerPoint slides, taking them from mediocre to memorable. Many of you have sent in slides to us. We had an overwhelming amount of response, so I'm really curious to see which one she's picked. She's going to show us her magic by showing us the before and the after. And I think that's going to be a really great way for us to learn how to make everything a little bit more magical. If you have any questions and you want to submit a question, what you can do on your dashboard is you'll see a place where you can submit questions to us, and then there is a group of us here who'll be glad to interact with Ellen, give her your question, or save it to at the end when we'll be opening up the audience to questions. Let me tell you a little bit about why we're doing this and a little bit why you're going to hear a lot more from us as we've changed. If you notice one thing, the logo's different. What we've done is talked to you, surveyed you, understood a little bit more about who you are, and one of the things we learned was that you really wanted to have a more online interactive community of your peers, people who are presentation experts or pros that you wanted to learn from, wanted to share information and ideas from, find different resources, and that's the reason why we're doing what we're doing today. In the survey that we sent out in June, 65.4% of you said you would participate in an online interactive community, and that's what we're going to be talking about and starting today. So let me introduce Xpert Thinking. It's going to be a new program which will include engaging conversations with speakers in a community of your peers, a new online Ning community built just for you, increased availability to shared resources and events all in one place, and a series of webinars like the one we're talking about today. The Ning community is an invitation only. Each person on this webinar will be sent as part of the follow-up an invitation to join the community. Let me share with you a little bit about that community, and you can see some of the things that we're trying to do. We're going to have live conversations with PowerPoint on PowerPoint. We're going to talk about topics like slide layouts that always look good, presentation workshops, how to create a chart or graphics, maybe how to deal with a pivot table, which seems to be a really popular topic. We're going to follow on Twitter, and we'll get a chance to really showcase some of the things that we feel this community does a really great job of talking about. The webinars are going to be held at least once a month, and some of the topics are going to be as part of the survey. And some of the top topics on your wish list were things like audience engagement, PowerPoint makeovers, design, getting off on the right foot, and advanced PowerPoint design, to name a few. We had quite a few number of topics, and it was really hard to decide what to start with first. So we're very excited that the one we have decided to start with today is PowerPoint makeovers, taking your slides from mediocre to memorable. Dave Zielinski, who is the editor of PresentationXpert newsletter, was unable to join us today due to a family emergency, but he has got just such an amazing background, as you all know, from all of the wonderful things that he's done as the editor of the newsletter. He'll join us next month. Ellen is a recognized expert trainer. She's one of only 37 Microsoft PowerPoint MVPs in the world. She's authored 7 books, and I know from just the dry runs and practices I've already started to learn quite a bit with her as well. So let me take this opportunity to welcome Ellen, and I'm going to be turning it over to her. Ellen, welcome. Ellen, just want to make sure you can hear us and we can start.
Sorry about that. Yes. So hi, this is Ellen Finkelstein. I had myself muted, and that was the reason for that mistake. I just want to make sure that everyone can see my screen. You should see a gray flower on the screen as opposed to the slides that Sharon had on the screen. So just a little shout out in the questions box if you can let me know that you can see my screen. Yes, good. Okay. We're ready to start then. Okay, all good. Yes, 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 all good. Lots of yeses. Great. So thank you very much again, Sharon, for that introduction, and good morning or afternoon, wherever you are. I'm pleased to kick off this great webinar series. It's such a great idea, and I think throughout all of these webinars, you're going to learn a lot. The people at PresentationXpert, Sharon mentioned that they did surveys, and so they chose this topic, take your slides from mediocre to memorable, based on your responses to their questionnaire. And I know from my own experience that many presenters have problems designing memorable slides, and that makes sense because most of you aren't designers, yet you need to make an impact. So we want to talk about today taking your slides from mediocre to memorable. Now another way of looking at that is to turn death by PowerPoint into life by PowerPoint. So I'm going to start with some principles for memorable presentations, and then I'm going to, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the research and how the brain works. And so these are concepts that you need to know, then they'll serve as a guideline for how you design slides. And then I'm going to give you some specific techniques to help make it easy. And then finally, as Sharon mentioned, I'm going to do some makeovers. And those makeovers will bring out other points as well that are more specific to those specific presentations. But I had an interesting time doing them. It was fun. So this is you. You might not look like that, but you need to give an important presentation. I think all of you share that. The problem is that you aren't, as we discussed, you aren't a designer or an information specialist, and you may want to hire a designer. I actually always recommend it, but you might not have the budget or you might not have the time, so it just might not be an option for you. So today, I want you to get ready to learn simple techniques that you can use to communicate more effectively. So I hope you're as eager as that girl. So what are the problems about not presenting effectively? What happens when you give a mediocre presentation? Well, the first thing is that you don't achieve your goals. And we just know that a presentation can miss the mark for various reasons. And when I do a full day session, I cover not only design of slides, I cover content. That can also be a problem, and I also cover delivery, which can also be an issue. But today we'll be talking just about the slides. So another problem is that you may make your audience hate you, and some of you have probably at least been in the audience feeling like, I hate that presenter is driving me crazy. So you can, hopefully it's not as extreme as this, I was exaggerating a little bit, but you can create a negative reaction in your audience, and nobody wants that. Now, on a more serious note, poor communication can be actually dangerous. This is a picture of the liftoff of the Challenger, and most of you know what happened to that. Very sad story of how it exploded. Now, the next slide was made famous by Edward Tufte. It was a slide that was presented, and going beyond the science, which most people don't understand, I want to show you what part of this slide says something important. So it's way at the bottom of the slide, and it says flight condition is significantly outside of the test database. And what this means is that they were testing these, they're talking about the tiles up that were on the outside of the Challenger, and what they're saying is that the conditions in the actual flight are significantly outside what they've tested. Now look how significantly outside they are. I don't know what volume of ramp means, but whatever it is, it was 1,920 cubic inches versus 3 cubic inches. So that's a little bit more than significant. It's extreme. Now look at the title of the slide, and I'm going to be talking about slide titles quite a bit. It doesn't say, emergency, we have a big problem. Instead, it just says, the review of test data indicates conservatism. Now, we don't know what the person who presented this actually said, but we do know that not everybody attended the meeting and that these slides were emailed around. And so you can imagine that someone looking at this would not easily find the point. So another reason is that it's bad for your career. Presentation skills, communication skills are important for your career, so you really want to do a good job of presenting. And finally, and maybe most important, you have something important to say, so you want to do a good job. So I think that those are reasons that we want to change mediocre to memorable. We want to change death by PowerPoint to life by PowerPoint. So before I go on, I think this is a good time now, Sharon, for those polls. We had 2 polls, and I just wanted to get an idea of what types of presentations you do in a simple way, and also which version of PowerPoint you're using, and it'll help me focus on your needs. So Sharon, could you do those? Okay, good. So, okay, I guess I do it. Okay, so the first poll is, what type of presentations do you use? Right, so you're voting. That's good. I have about 50% of you voting, so let's get a few more. 65% of you. 75. 80. Oh, we have a good group. Sharon, thanks for that icebreaker at the beginning. I think everybody's involved. Okay, so we have 84%. I'm going to close the poll now, and I'm going to share it with you so that you can see it.
Ellen, I would say nobody's asleep at this point, that we definitely got them awake, so the rest is up to you.
Okay, so we have 22% sales, 23% internal, and 47% training. In most of my webinars that I do, I almost always have a large group of training people, and finally I asked them why, and they said because we're trainers, we're teaching, and we always want to learn, and that's why we're always at these learning types of sessions. But I know that everybody wants to learn. So, and then we have 7% other. I'm not sure what you mean by other. I know there are, for example, motivational and inspirational presentations would be in that group of others. Okay, great. So, okay, so now I'm sharing that with you. You can see those results. I think that's cool. So I'm going to hide that now, and then I'm going to go right on to the second poll. Okay, so this just briefly says which version of PowerPoint are you using.
Ellen, I'm just looking at them coming in, and I'm really surprised to see how many 2010s are out there. I thought still 2007 was out there. So it's pretty sophisticated audience.
Yeah, I think most people are up to 2010 by now. It depends on the organization, but okay, we have 84%. I'm going to close that and share that with you. So you can see we have 57% using 2010, which is the latest PC version. We have 33 using 2007, 6% using 2003, please upgrade, and 4% using the Mac. Okay, so we're going to hide that, and everyone should see my slide again now.
We do.
Good, excellent. Okay. So thank you for that information. It'll just help me kind of focus a little bit on what kinds of presentations you do. So there are 3 problems with many slides. And we're going to talk about these problems and then the solutions. And one is that people can't effectively read and listen at the same time. And I will go into that in a little bit more detail. And the second one is that short-term memory is limited, and I will explain that as well. And then finally, people don't remember words as well as pictures. The positive side is that people remember pictures better than words. So let's go into these into a little bit more detail, and so you understand these principles and how they relate to designing your slides. And what you need to do is you need to design for understanding, remembering, and sometimes persuasion. A lot of you are trainers, and you might not feel that persuasion is an important part of what you do. It's a little part. You always need to persuade people to be engaged, to use what you train in their job, but a lot of it is informational. But for those of you who are doing, let's say, sales presentations, it's obvious, and even internal presentations where you might be trying to present a proposal and get approval for it, persuasion is an important part of those presentations. So let's go into this concept that people can't effectively read and listen at the same time. When you put all of your text on the slide, the first thing that happens is people just look at it and they start to read it. Now, if you're talking at the same time that they're reading, their mind is divided. It's inefficient and uncomfortable for your audience. So the solution is simple. Don't put what you say on the slide. A heading is okay, but for the rest, let people simply listen to you. Now this is, and some of the comments that you made at the beginning, this is hard for some people. First of all, when you first do it, it's a little scary. If you're delivering it, it's like, what do I say? The text that I'm going to say is not on the slide anymore. And the solution to that really is just practicing. And once you do it 2 or 3 times, practice it over, you'll know what you need to say. And the other thing is you can divide slides up so that you have the text on a title with some kind of visual, so that it's divided up into several slides, which doesn't really take any more time than putting it all on one slide. So that's the first thing, is that it's hard for people to, and by the way, when people read, they can read a lot more quickly than you can speak, and so they finish all of the text on the slide, and then they kind of turn their attention to you, and you're saying stuff they've already read, and so they tune out. They're tuning out to you first because they're reading, and then when they start listening to you, they're tuning out again because they've already read it. The second thing has to do with short-term memory. We could say that there are 3 types of memory. The first could be called sense memory or sensory memory. It can take in, and this is what you see and hear, represented by the eye and the ear, but it could be all of your senses. It can take in a huge amount of content, but then it goes on to the next input, so it's very momentary. It doesn't last. Now, what does last goes into short-term memory. So this is also short-term. That's why it's called short-term memory, a few minutes or so, but short-term memory can only handle a few items at a time. Now, you may have heard of research that says we can remember 7 things at a time, and that's why phone numbers are 7 digits, but it turns out that that research was really only talking about digits, and it isn't talking about ideas, concepts. So when you're talking about ideas or concepts, it's more like 3 or 4 that we can remember at a time. So when too much enters short-term memory, most is filtered out, and that's this concept of the going through the eye of the needle, which I got from Cliff Atkinson, who uses it in his book Beyond Bullet Points. So I thought it was a great analogy. So what does go through the funnel, this eye, goes on to long-term memory, where we can remember large amounts of data and material concepts for a long time. But when you put too much on a slide, the short-term memory is overwhelmed and less is remembered. And this is the kind of contrary to intuition, the fact that the more you put on, the less people remember, on one slide, and so that you have to kind of a less is more concept. You have to limit it so that, and people will come out with more at the end. The third concept is picture superiority, and here I want to show you a little bit about how the brain works. So the brain has what's called the primary visual cortex, and that's this entire area over here at the occipital lobe. It also has an primary auditory cortex, which is over here, and you can see that it's much smaller. So much more of the brain goes into taking in and understanding visual input compared to auditory input. And the research has shown simply that people remember pictures more than words. They're also more influenced by them, so they're more persuasive. So let me tell you a scary story. There was some research done with a mock trial, and they had jurors in this mock trial. It was a murder case, and the question was somebody had fallen off a balcony and died, and whether the person was pushed or just fell. And they did it in 2 ways. They showed it to 2 different groups, and the group that saw a picture of somebody falling was 70 or 80% more likely to convict. And even though there was no additional information given there, the picture didn't show the person was pushed or not, but it was just being able to visualize that concretely helped them move along in that direction. So pictures help us understand, they help us remember, and they're persuasive. So what's the solution? How do we help people understand and remember what we say? So we want to find some solutions. So here's a slide that is obviously what some of you were talking about at the beginning, just lots of bullet points. And I use this slide a lot to show how you can redo slides because it's not fluff. It's actually a kind of technical topic, health coverage financing. I'll give you a second to scan through it. So how many of you have been in audiences where you had to sit through slides like this. So just give me a little shout out here in that questions thing, whether you've seen slides like this. So yep, unfortunately, yes, definitely, ugh, yes, all the time. I do this. Hot poker in the eye, daily. Oh yes, all the time. Okay, too many times. Okay. So again, it's not just simple or large concepts. It's actually technical content. So I'm going to talk about the solution, and then we're going to do a makeover of this slide. I'll show you in a minute. So the solution I call the tell and show method. It's based on some research done by Michael Alley. He's a researcher at the Engineering School, University of Pennsylvania, and he called it assertion evidence, and I thought tell and show was a little bit more catchy. But basically you make an assertion and then you show evidence. So in terms of tell and show, you tell, in this title of the slide, you tell your point and then you show it. It's just like the boys' picture book. You see on one side it tells the story, and the other side it shows it with this big picture. And this applies to many different types of situations. I'll be showing you mostly pictures, but it applies to charts and diagrams and all sorts of technical things as well. And the other thing I want to emphasize here is that this is easy. It's basically an easy concept. You tell it, you show it. You tell it, you show it. And when you're planning a presentation, you can list what your points are and then what your evidence is, how you're going to show each point. A corollary is to put one point on a slide. Now, you can't always do that, but as much as possible, it's helpful to remember for the short-term memory, that limitation of short-term memory, to break things up, to chunk them so that people can remember them better. So when I say show, how do you show? So there are basically three types of visuals. One is diagrams. You use that when your items have a relationship. So, for example, I might say presentations have three parts to them: content, design, and delivery. But as you can see from that little icon, the content comes first, and then it goes to, first you think about what you're going to say, and then you move to design, and then finally you deliver the presentation. So there's a relationship in terms of time and what you do first and second and third. Charts, obviously, you know you do, and they're also called graphs when you're working with data. And finally, images to show your point either literally or symbolically. And maybe some of you will have some questions about what types of images to use, but basically those two types of images. Now, when I do the full-day version of this concept, I go into each type of visual in detail, how to create diagrams, how to format charts, and a lot about formatting images as well. So those are actually big topics. This covers a lot of ground, what you're seeing on this slide. The tell and show method solves the three problems of poorly designed slides. Remember, we said the first one was that people can't effectively read and listen at the same time, right? So I'm going to click, and that's going to change. So what it does is it puts just a heading on each slide. Now the second problem is short-term memory is limited. So what it does is it provides content in short chunks. And then finally, people remember pictures more than words, or I could say people don't remember words as well as pictures. That's the problem, and the solution is it uses visuals to help people remember. So let's go back to this slide, and I'll show you how I made it over. You can see here there are 4 points, the different types of financial covering. A long time ago, I used to be a benefits manager, and I do stuff like this, so that's where it came from. So here's the first slide. One of the things is that we don't have to have that title that says health coverage financing. We can just say it. We can just say there are 4 types of health coverage financing, and that doesn't need to be on the slide. And so here we have a statement. It says individual rated insurance often requires an exam. Now, you all know what an exam is, but you're going to go through 3 more points, and this picture is going to help you remember what individual rated insurance is. It's for people who need to go get insurance on their own, not in a group with a company. And so they go to a doctor, and the doctor takes their blood pressure. Now, the second type of coverage is community rated, it's called. And what it does is it bases insurance rates on a community. In the United States, it's generally a whole state. So Blue Cross Blue Shield, for example, or any insurance company will gather all the data it has for the state and say, well, this is how healthy people are. This is how much they spend on insurance, and so I'm going to give you a rate based on the state that you're in. And this can be done for a company that's first starting to have insurance coverage because they don't know how healthy those people are yet. They're just starting to have coverage for the first time. Experience-rated insurance is based on the claims experience of an organization's employees. So let's say that company starts to provide insurance and then using community rating, and then after 3 years, lo and behold, the insurance company does know how healthy those people are and how much insurance, how many doctors they go to and how much they spend. And so now it can base the insurance on the actual experience, and this is usually more beneficial for the company. And finally, in self-insured coverage, you're learning a lot about insurance here. Hopefully you're learning something about slides as well. In self-insured coverage, the organization pays the actual claims plus the administrative fee. So there's a picture of a claim form, and when companies are larger, 200 or 300, it actually becomes financially more beneficial to not insure everything and to actually just pay the claims plus pay the company for processing them. So do you see how that helps you to understand by just seeing the visuals? It helps you to understand and remember. So somebody's saying great pics. I just would like to get some feedback of you if you felt that these were helpful ways to deal with complicated. Let's see, is a picture like the form since you're not expecting them to read the details? Yes, the purpose is that you should understand that it's a claim form. If I were to actually go over the claim form as a claim form, then I would have to zoom it in. Okay, so much better, very helpful, powerful. You make it look easy, much easier to look at. So Angela says, I noticed the slides have quite a bit of white space. Is that important? I tend to use white slides like this. You don't have to, but yes, because just by not overloading the brain with too much stuff on the slide, it helps the brain to settle down and incorporate and take in that content. So it makes a kind of lower, not so active type of slide. So I think it does happen. Okay. So someone says, if you have super technical data, how do you deal with it? Let me go back up here. How do you share this information? Catherine asks that. So it depends on what the information is. So you'd have to be a little bit more detailed about what it is. If it's scientific, very often you can show examples, graphs or photographs of a machine or whatever it is. So very often you can show things that actually show the process that's going on. Sometimes it's difficult. For example, if I'm covering, we had someone here from the IRS, so I'm covering Section 401K of the IRS, and I'm trying to explain this section of the Internal Revenue Code. There are certain things that I can do to visualize, especially icons and relationships between things. But some things are harder than others to visualize. That's for sure.
So, Ellen, we have a really interesting thing from Jennifer. She said the concern is that something you used to get across in one slide is now on 4. If you emailed this presentation, it might not make sense. How do you address that?
Right. There are several things that you can do. I don't recommend. Let me just show you actually what I have. I'm going to go into normal view here, and this isn't a good slide because I don't think I have anything on it, but let me show you how I should be able to, yeah. So here. So do you see that I have my script at the bottom here in the notes? And here's another example. I guess not there. Here, you can see that in the notes at the bottom I have my script. Now when you, afterwards I'll give you everybody the URL where you can download my pictures of the slide and this script, which is what I'm working with. And what you'll see is a picture of the slide and these notes at the bottom. I'm using what's called a notes pages is what I printed and made a PDF of. And so you can put everything there together in one place in those notes. Plus, you can do something like this slide, which has all of 3 things together. And then if I were going to go through a much longer presentation where I was going to go into diagrams in detail and into charts in detail and into images in detail, then I would separate them out. So you could have one slide that puts them together and then break them out. Okay? So let me go back to my last slide here.
Ellen, we have a lot of questions which we can save towards the end. We're keeping track of
Yes.
them, so
No,
you should be here for a while.
Well, I'd like, yeah, I know. I'd like to answer some questions, if your questions about what I've said now, because I'm ready to move on to some specific techniques. Okay, so yes, why don't you read me out some questions.
So one of them from Christine is, how do you determine what should be spoken and what should be captured on the slide?
Well, what I do is I write my script first. And I actually even have a lesson that I do sometimes on preparation. I think if you're going to speak, most people have a time limit. For example, I have to have this done in an hour. You know, we can stay over, by the way, if you want for questions. But basically, I have to think of that, plus some time for your introduction at the beginning and questions. So I think I actually have quite a bit less than that. And so I think the best thing to do is to write out your script, speak it out and time it, and make sure you have what you want to say. And then to go through and start chunking it up into how you're going to show each thing. And then certain things just don't have to be on this. Remember, when you're presenting, you're talking to people.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to show them everything you say. It's a conversation, and so you don't have to show the text of everything that you say. Just the important points that you want people to take away is what I would say.
I know M.W. Bailey has a really good point, and it's a good slideshow is not a good handout, and a good handout does not make a good slideshow. At the very least, you must include notes, like Ellen is saying. Better yet, create a different document, maybe as a support. I'd love to get your thoughts on that point.
No, I absolutely agree with it. And especially if you're doing something like a sales presentation where you want people to take away additional information, you can use those notes to put additional information on as well, and then give people a real handout. I like to do it using the presentation, but I like to add material, and there's a notes slide master, a notes master, so you can put your URL and your email address and other things like that on it, and so what they get is something much more than just the slides. So I agree. Anything else?
I think one from Anthony. Anthony says, I do presentation for engineers. They tend to use the slide text as their script. How do you get around that?
So, yeah, this is the $64 million question, the $64,000 question. I have a colleague who says you have to do an intervention. But basically, you need to educate people on these types of principles and maybe do a little training session based on it, and then show them some before and after slides, and then talk to them about what result they want to get from their audience. Now, I do have to say, I'm not sure exactly what we're talking about with engineers and what kind of presentations they do and what their audience is, but when I see scientists and doctors present at research conferences, forget it. There's no way they're going to change, because they all do the same thing, and they're all very intellectual and academic, and you know, it's hard. But when there's some type of persuasion involved, or when you really need to communicate something to people who might not understand everything that you say, then you need to start thinking about what you're doing to the audience and what your goal is and whether you're achieving it. And so you need to communicate that concept, give them some alternatives and some ideas, and try to show the next stage I'll be showing you is some ways to make this easy so that it isn't so difficult. And the other thing is that they have to practice, and people are very busy, they don't have time to practice, but when they sit down to a presentation by somebody who's practiced, and you see that they don't have to put all the time, it's just such a relief. It can be such a joy compared to, you know, this death by PowerPoint. And so if they have that experience, hopefully they'll want to do that themselves, and will take the time to try it out. It's a little bit a scary thing at first, but afterwards, when people make that change, that transformation, it's actually very exhilarating, because you're freed from reading the slides. You can actually talk to the people. It's a big difference.
I think that's good points. We've got lots of good points coming in, and we want to keep things going. But, Roberto had an interesting point. Why not provide the PowerPoint deck with a recorded version of it using tools such as Camtasia or Snagit? And if you don't have that means you can use certainly like Citrix, which is what we're using today. And we heard that from several people as tools that they use or share with in order to get prepared for their audiences.
Right. Recording, well, in terms of getting prepared, you can record it anyway and then listen back to your recording for preparation. But in order to, as opposed to leaving a handout or just the slides, leaving a recording is a great thing to do if you can do that. It's wonderful. And not everybody might be willing to spend that time. People sometimes want to scan through text, because it's much quicker.
Well, in a way, because we're going to have on-demand today, that's kind of what we're going to be doing, is giving.
That's what we're doing.
That's exactly what we're doing. So speaking of that, let's get you moved on to your next slide.
Okay. So the next section of this is some shortcuts to help make it easy. Now, normally you might have to go a kind of roundabout route, and it can be a little bit difficult to figure out how to do it, but we can create bridges that help get you a sort of straight path. So that's what the next section is all about, some shortcuts to make it easy. Here is a typical slide. The text is fine and it has a picture in it, but I call this a mediocre slide. It's just kind of a boring layout, and so this section is what I call 4 layouts that always look good. And it's a way to help you with your slide layout because it's specifically an area you might know what you want to say and you might know what picture you want, but because you're not designers, it's really hard to get it to look good. So I just want to take this slide and redo it. There'll be 4 different layouts, and I think you'll see, I hope you'll see, the difference. Okay? So the first one is this one. And what it is simply a picture on the right and text on the left, and you can do it the other way around. You can put the picture on the left. And what I've done, obviously, if I go back to the previous slide, you can see that I've cropped the picture. So if you can see my cursor, I've cropped it here and here. So when I do that, what happens is the picture is actually much more powerful because you're so close to the little boy. And cropping can make it much more powerful. And because it just takes up so much more of the screen, this looks more striking, will have a greater impact than the first slide. So I just call this vertical pictures. That's the first layout. Of course, you've seen slides like this. This is basically the picture taking up the entire slide. And in this case, the text works fairly well. You can read it fairly well on it. Sometimes a picture will interfere with the legibility. And so in that case, you do something like this. You take that placeholder and you make it semi-transparent. And in the handout, I have the instructions specifically how to do that. I have some instructions on how to crop an image, how to resize an image, how to make a placeholder semi-transparent, and one more thing that I'll tell you about in a minute. So this is, remember my tell and show slide with the little boy reading the book? It's the same layout. It's the text at the top and the picture at the bottom. Again, you'll probably have to crop it, which is good. And this is the 4th thing, which is the text at the upper right, up at the left, and the picture at the bottom. Now, why did I use pencils instead of the boy writing? Because the boy writing, it's a square picture, and it looks a little clunky at the bottom there with that square rectangle. So this technique works best with an image that has no background or the same background as the slide. And here's another version of it with the text at the bottom and the clock at the top. And so the other technique that I have steps for in the handout is how to remove a solid colored background. Usually it's white. From a picture, you can do that all the way back to PowerPoint 2003. Now PowerPoint 2010 has a more advanced technique for removing complicated backgrounds, but I just gave you this one. It'll cover pretty much all of you. So are there any questions about these 4 layouts before we go on?
We've got lots of questions, but I'm not sure we got questions related to particularly to this layout or any of these 4 layouts.
Okay, so I'm going to go on then. I'm going to have 2 more things in terms of these little shortcuts. I have 2 flourishes. I think I mentioned that these are from my ebook, Slide Design for Non-Designers, and these are 2 of the 4 that are in there. So look at the slide. I'm going to do something subtle, so see if you can see the difference, what I do when I click, what the change is. Okay, did you all see that? Okay. Did you see what I did?
Why don't we do it again? Can we do it again?
Yes, we can do it again. Let me click on the slide. So see it now. That's before, and that's after. Okay, I got one yes. Okay, yes, okay, so some people are seeing it. Now here's another version of it that's a little, okay, we got it. Added a line, good. So here's another version of it, okay? This is actually a very rectangle, but it looks like a line, okay? Okay, much nicer. So, yeah, so the difference between, let me go back to it. This just looks kind of plain, and this is a little flourish design. You see it's called a key line. You'll see it if you look in magazine ads and things like that. And key lines sometimes separate material, sometimes they hold material together, sometimes they're just kind of for a little bit more of a professional look. But it's an easy thing. It's just a line that you can draw, so it's very easy to do. And this one, so this one I also have this handout. So somebody asked about the handout. At the end, I'll give you the URL, and I think it'll also be in the follow-up email of where you can go to download the handout. And I have steps for creating what's called the transparency gradient. So in this case, it's transparent at the left, transparent at the right, but opaque in the middle, and so it creates that effect. And so I have the instructions for steps for doing that. So here's another slide, and this is a pretty slide. It says we are global and has the places we are, but look at the difference here. So do you see how it just, that band just holds everything together, makes it a little bit more professional looking, but also holds together the concept, the world, and all of the different places. And so this is called a belly band, and it's just a transparency gradient. It's just a blue rectangle that goes from a solid to transparent, solid on the left to transparent on the right. And the other thing that's nice about these transparency gradients is they give a little of what we call a photoshopped look. They look like somebody went into Photoshop and did some fancy work, but you can do them in PowerPoint. So I mentioned before that these techniques are from slide design from non-designers, and that I'll give you the URL where you can download the handout, but also I'm going to give all of you today a 20% discount on this. It's an ebook. So I think we're ready. So I want to know if there are any other questions about all of this content, because I am ready to do makeovers.
I think we've had some questions with regards to things like readability of white on color backgrounds.
Right. So you want as much contrast as possible. I was looking at that world thing, and I thought maybe the color wasn't dark enough for the white text, but you always want to have, bright, dark colors and light colors together when you're having text. And somebody's asking about copyright issues that I see. And so all of these are either from the Microsoft Office Clipart Gallery, and there's some other sites that I use. There's something called Stock Exchange, which is a great site for free photographs. And I also recommend taking your own photographs. So I'm going to go into normal view, because I'm going to be opening up other presentations here. Oh, but I have to show you something cute. So somebody complained that this was too feminine, so I came up with a masculine version of Makeovers. I thought you'd get a kick out of it. I know, it's called a transformer, but it's the same thing. We want you to transform your presentations.
Love it.
Oh, and you can see at the bottom of this slide the courtesy of. So you can go to Flickr.com and look for something called Creative Commons work that you can modify and use for commercial use, and you just have to give attribution. And so that's another source for photos and videos, and that's where I got this from.
But as it makes perfect sense, as we kind of talk about transforming, Monique brings up a point or a question that she creates a lot of presentations for speakers that provide heavily designed templates. And any advice for working within other people's bad design?
Well, wait till you see some of these makeovers. Yeah, it's first of all, sometimes you can just use a blank slide and try to get rid of the template. Cover everything with a white rectangle if you have to, and just start from scratch. yeah, it can be difficult. Some of the templates are so overly busy and take up so much of the slide with the design that there's not much room for anything else, and they're distracting. So I think you'll see some of these how I redid some of these. Some of them I went into the Slide Master and changed them.
Jennifer's asking, can you give the name of that search field for Flickr content again?
Oh yeah, so you go into Flickr.com, and then what I do is you click in the search box, there's a little link that says Advanced Search, and then when you go there, you put your search term in, and then down at the bottom of that page, there's a checkbox for Creative Commons, and you check that box, and then underneath that you check the commercial use, and underneath that you check that that you can modify it. And then you search, and anything that you can use, anything you find there, you can use with attribution. So I got this slide, and it's a graph, and I think you can see that it's really impossible to see what the values are for two reasons. Number one, it's a three-dimensional graph, which is 3D graphs are notoriously hard to decipher, and then it also has this logo at the back of it, which is kind of unusual, but it also makes it difficult. And the other thing is you can see that it doesn't really use the tell and show method. So at the top it just says more press releases, but it doesn't say anything about the press releases. There's no point. Now the point is made in the small text, and this is what I'm trying to get you to change, is to put the point on the top of the slide and get rid of the little text. The other thing about this is that one of the things I did a couple of times is I went to the company's website. And so this is an example of what the website looks like. It's just a screenshot here. I just took a screenshot of the website. So you can see the colors here and this circle and this arrow logo. I reproduced this arrow, kind of a complicated thing. So I came up with a look like this. This would be a cover slide. And I think, let's see, hold on. So I'm going to choose View and Slide Master. Yeah, so what I did was I actually put this on the Slide Master. For the title slide, you can see it's just a circle, a little arrow thing here. This is just a rectangle. And then I added it to the title and content layout, and I added it down here to the title only content. Those are the layouts I used most often. Now, if you want something to be on every slide, you use this top one over here. But in this case, I didn't want the bar to be at the top, for example, of this title slide. Here I want it to be in the middle. So I just left that blank. And one of the problems about this template was it had this gold text, which I didn't think was all that readable on the white background. And you can see when we go exit it, you can see that when you look at their website, you know, it's dark blue with white text. It's really good. It's a really good design, and it's a great thing to take a cue from because most of us have our websites professionally designed. So I created this, and then here's the actual slide. So what I did was I took most of the text and put it up here on the top. So you can say mark on press releases in ThomasNet up from 1 per quarter to 2 per month. And so that makes the point. And then there was this little extra thing that this about 150 viewings, you know, was the best ThomasNet response, and I pointed to where it was. I'm not really sure that that was accurate in this case, what they were talking about. But and then I made the graph much simpler. So in this case, because this was just like a picture, so I didn't have the data, I couldn't, when I went into design and tried to edit the data, it just gave me, it's linked, it's not available. So I actually went in and reproduced the numbers and created a graph like this. And you can see that a line graph is sometimes much clearer to show trends over time than the default bar graph. Okay, so the points I want to make here are branding and charts, simplicity of charts. Okay, let me open another one. So this is what the slide that I was given, and this is actually a training slide. And so many of you are trainers, and when I started looking at it, I went, well, this is actually a procedure. But then it was funny because obviously you want them to discontinue conversation or activities such as eating, chewing gum, and typing before they answer the phone. So I thought that the order was wrong. And, you know, what was the point that was trying to be made? And you know, it wasn't like you're going to necessarily use the whole button before you transfer. It might be either or. So one of the things that you can often do with something like this is turn it into SmartArt. And the way you turn it into, and this is for 2007, 2010, I'll just make a duplicate of this and show you some of it. You just click anywhere in here, click Convert to SmartArt, and you choose one of the options. In this case, I think I chose this one here, and then you modify it. So you can see what I did here. I chose an option that was a little more colorful, so instead of it being all the same color like the original here, I chose this one. And but I did some interesting things with the text as well. So when you go into SmartArt, you have this little box here where you can type the text. So of course I put discontinue conversation, and I edited it a little bit, put that first, then you answer promptly, then you speak clearly and distinctly, which I'm not doing right now, and then I just wrote you use appropriate features, and then with sub-bullets either the whole button or transferring. And then what I did was, remember this last item here that says first impressions stay? I actually put that right at the top of the slide. First impressions count when you answer the phone. So again, instead of it being the last item, let's make that the first item, because that's your persuasive aspect in training. That's where you're trying to convince the people that they should do it right. And so let's make that first and foremost. Let's see.
Ellen, I think that
technical things here. Go ahead.
Ellen, I think that makes a huge difference. I think you can really clearly see the before and the after and see that it's got more impact.
Right, right. And of course I added a photo, which in this case doesn't really help them to understand it because everybody understands what answering the phone is, but it does help them to remember. And it also has, because she's smiling, it looks like she's having fun being on the phone, so it does have an emotional impact that helps engage people. So it has a purpose there. Okay, so again, before and after. So here was an example of a template that was difficult to use for various reasons. But let me see what happens when I put in a new slide here. Yeah, so somebody was talking about fighting templates. So this template actually has all the text on the bottom. That's the way the template is created. View, slide master, they're all on the bottom. And so because the person found this completely unusable, what they did was they just manually put text boxes on the top of every slide. So, so one of the things you really need to do, if you have the permission to do so, is to make sure your slide master does what you want it to do, so you don't have to change every slide. It's so much extra work, and it results in very inconsistent slides as well. So I think we can get rid of that one. So I redid this one, the agenda. Now, this was a little confusing to me. You know, normally if I would do this, I would ask the person what they're trying to say, and it sounded like a quality business review. That sounded like an internal presentation. But then when I saw this, it sounded like a sales presentation, that they were meeting with ABC Insurance and trying to sell their product, their subrogation services to ABC Insurance. So if you're doing a sales presentation, you should absolutely never show them a slide like this. It just looks so boring, and they kind of know what you're there for. So you want to make it a little bit more visual, and I actually kept the text on here, but I turned this into SmartArt again. And I do this a lot because it's pretty easy to do it in 2007 and 2010. So what I did was I engaged them here. This is the purpose of it. How can we help you maximize your subrogation revenue? By asking a question, you're engaging them, and you're just saying what the thing is. It's not just agenda, okay? And so we have, but the rest of the text is pretty much the same, but by emphasizing it here and just making it a little bit more graphic, it just is a little bit more engaging. First, we'll talk about ABC Insurance and your top priorities and challenges and what we need to know to help you, and then we'll talk a little bit about us and why we're the people for you, and then finally, let's talk about opportunities to work together.
Ellen, we have a question. Do you animate SmartArt?
Here's the thing. You can ungroup SmartArt, so I can right-click it. Whoops. Right-click and choose a group, ungroup, and you have to do this twice, and then you get lots of different things. So you want to regroup the things you want to work together. Like I would probably group up together this thing with this arrow and this whole section here with this arrow and then this, and then you could just make them appear if you wanted to do that. So that would be the way to do it.
Anne says that she's grayed out some text in some SmartArt sections until she gets to that point. So that we're all playing with the SmartArt in order to get to do what we want.
Right, right. Ungrouping it is, definitely necessary sometimes. So here is a chart, and what I want to say about charts is just, again, make them as simple as possible. So this is what I changed it to. Now, I had to go into Excel and kind of create these things. So first of all, look at the percentages here. We don't need 2 decimal places. It's the default. So let's just get rid of that and just like this. And then sometimes you want these. I like to get rid of the, again, this is a picture actually, so that's why I had to recreate it. But these grid lines, sometimes you need them so people can look across and see it. But let's make them kind of a little faded here. Maybe that's a little too faded. But you can make them a lighter gray. And then, instead of having this white box on it, which is sort of annoying, I just got rid of it and just made it white. And I think it's just clearer here. I think that's all I did on this one.
We have some questions with regards to that. How do you present multiple charts, all lines, bars and lines, or would you put that all on one slide?
Sometimes you can do, in fact, I played around with this, trying to, for example, here, you could, I'm still getting drawing tools here, but you can create one that's a line and one that's a chart if you want to. It's a kind of advanced topic, but I think you have to ask somebody who says, what does this chart say? And if in 2 seconds they get what it says, then you've done it right. You have to make it clear to people in the audience. So I think you have to be audience-centered when you're talking about this. There's no one answer.
I think it's a good point. Ellen, we're running long, but it seems like people are willing to stay, so let's keep going for a little bit longer. Then we got a ton of questions for you.
Okay, good. Okay. Yeah, the makeovers can take as long as, anything. So what are we up to? This one? Oh, yeah. So, again, it's a lot of text, and people can't read it. So if you're going to present, some people print out slides and they hand them out as handouts. And so then you can have 12-point text on it, and people are reading it, and you're just using PowerPoint as a design tool to create a document, which is fine. But if you're going to project this on a screen, people can't read it, so there's no point. So anytime you have to apologize, sorry you can't read this, then you're doing something wrong. So what I redid this way. This is SmartArt again, but I think, it's full SmartArt. I didn't even ungroup it. So there's these 3 concepts: applications, general needs, and Triplight's complete solution. And then it has these little pictures. And another thing about these photographs are great, but you can't see them. So the same thing applies to the photographs. So I put the text here. I think it's just a little bit easier to read. There's the same text, okay? And I made it very simple and kind of orderly. It looks a little bit more orderly. And then I created a second slide that said we have products to meet every system need, and I made the pictures bigger. In this case, you want pictures that can be big enough without looking grainy. It's not a good idea to take small pictures and make them big, but I didn't have anything else. So, and so this is just a list of the products, and then you could discuss them separately. So in this case, I think it needed 2 slides. Oh, I remember this one. I didn't do anything with this one. There's nothing you can do with this one. Well, I had the idea. So this one is just, there's too much. There's no way anyone's ever going to be able to read it. But I would say things like, don't put in extra pictures like this. They're just not necessary. And even this one, I would just make a circle and put this text inside the circle here. It's the employee joining them. Here, what is the next step? I would just lead from this arrow to these 2 different options. So get rid of as much as possible as you can. Now, they did do something really cool, and this is a nice idea. So you have over here senior, individual, I can't even read it, contributor track and management track. And so they took this one, and then on the next slide it continues this to the right. So they, here. So we have a continuation of this, and at the bottom we have a continuation of this section down here. And so I just wanted to show you something that you can do when you have so much on a slide that you just need to continue it. I added this transition that moves it to the right, so I can go back now and I can say, we go across and you see your individual track, and so let me show you what happens then, and you go to the right and you can just see how it's continued. So that's a technique you can use. This is called a PAM transition. It's something that you can do. So I don't have any good solutions for putting so much on a slide. It's just too much.
So Ellen, Nancy's asking, how did you do that?
Oh, so you go to the second slide and you do transitions, and in 2007 it's on this. These are on the same tab, and you just choose this pan. This might be new for 2010, but if it is, then you can always use the push one, which will up, and you can choose push from the right. So either one you can use. And you just attach that to the second slide, and then when you go into slideshow view, it'll push it over. So yeah, like I said, it's a good technique when you have too much on a slide and you want to break it up. Okay, so this is from Chevron, and you can see they have a picture here that I'll show you. View, Slide Master. So you can see they have a template, which is good. And I also went to their website and looked at some of the colors. I use a program called Color Pick. It's an eyedropper program, and there are lots of free ones available. But it picks up colors, and so I can use that to pick up exactly this color and use it again. So here, let's look at the content here. It says, Energy Savings and Economic Development. Now remember, that's not the tell and show method because the title doesn't actually say something. So we want to change that. And then it has 1, 2, and 3. But it actually isn't 1, 2, and 3. It says local retail spending grows, and that leads to more jobs. But number 3 is actually just the numbers, the specific numbers of it. It's not like a third step at all. And so we want to make this clearer. And so I did this like this. Again, it could have been on 2 slides, but I matched this blue to the Chevron blue. So I basically, this is SmartArt again, I said, so you would read this, first of all, now it says something on the title. It says, Energy Savings Leads to Economic Development. Okay, so we have a point that you can remember now on the title. And here are the steps. Energy savings leads to increased retail spending because people are spending less on energy. And then there's a multiplier effect. If you go to a restaurant, and then the restaurant has more money, so they can spend more money. So the net result is more retail jobs. So what are some of the details about that? Well, $1 million in energy savings leads to $1.2 to $1.7 million in retail spending. Now that leads to 9 utility jobs lost because people are spending less on energy, but there are 22 to 32 retail jobs gained. So you see how the flow works as you speak it? I think you kind of need to speak these slides out and see how it works. You'll see that the flow, and I might have even, let me see if I animated this. Yeah, I did. So, so you go through that whole thing, and then you say, so what are the details? Well, this, and then this. And so it really helps people to understand the point. Okay, so from this to that. This was more of an organization of the content than a design issue.
Ellen, we probably have time for one more that we could kind of go over, and then we have some questions.
Okay. So we're going to lose wellness for you. But okay, so here's Boston University, and they gave me 3 slides. It's a global university, a picture of a world with some specific things, and then they said, well, how about this one? And then they said, well, how about this one? So this one is the worst because the background is so fuzzy that it looks awful and it's hard to read the text. So, that's the worst one. And this one, the text is too small to read. So I worked with this one. I thought that was the closest. Again, I went and looked at their website. I took a screenshot of it just to get some idea of the colors. And for example, I don't know if you can see this, but you see this like orangey red color? So it actually is not Boston University's color, which is more of a blue-red. So match your colors, match your branding. And I ended up with this, and maybe I animated it as well. Now, so the first thing is get a better map. You know, don't take a screenshot from Google Maps, which is what this is. So get a good map, do a good job of that. I think I changed the layout to title and content. The master has not been formatted at all, so if you go into here and here, you know, it's just, this is the default. So if you want certain colors here, then put those in the slide master. Yeah, get a better map. Oh, the other thing is that here it said Boston University, Global University, Boston University. Well, you don't need to say it twice. People who are listening know it's Boston University, so you could just say it's a global university. And yes, so I animated that so people see the map, and then we make our points. And your map should show Antarctica if you have people, places in Antarctica. Might as well. So there you go. That's how that works.
I think that's great.
Okay.
We have lots of questions. So one of the first questions is, are there any overall guidelines about animation?
Use it only when it's necessary, and make it as subtle as possible. Unless you're trying to create an artistic, beautiful thing, you know, you can do that. But for something like this, this is just an appear. It's like the simplest animation possible. No, it's a fade. So, you know, it comes in, it kind of fades in a little bit, but so quickly that, you know, you don't. I was working with a client this morning, and they had this text animation is especially problematic, you know, and you sort of have to sit there and wait for the text to appear. It is so annoying. So you want this to happen quick, and you want it to be pretty crisp. Use it when it's necessary. In this case, the reason I used the animation was because there was no way I was going to get the map and the text in on a slide. And so I wanted to show people the map first, and then once they've seen the map, they don't really need to see the map anymore, so that I can put the text, and then it looks kind of nice together.
I think there's a really good question from Babette about, should we always have a template that includes the logo, our logo, and the registration or copyright mark? Does that have to be on every slide?
I prefer that it's not on every slide. In this case, we only have one slide, so we don't know. Well, here they have a different one over here. But no, you don't. And in fact, one of the problems with doing that, I find, is there are a couple of problems. When you put the logo on the slide master, and therefore it appears on every slide, you can't make it very big because otherwise it interferes with your text. So people tend to make it small. And also when it's on every slide, you just start to forget it, just like to ignore it. That's what the audience does. Like you ignore ads on Facebook now, you know, because you just learn to ignore them. So instead, it makes sense to take that logo, put it on your first slide big, and then not put it on the rest of the slides, and then put it on your last slide big. So that would be my recommendation. There are exceptions.
Charles has a question or request. He'd like to get some advice on how to make the first slides to the most impactful through animation, or do you use other methods to break the ice and really get the audience's attention out of the gate?
Yes, and you know, you saw what I did with mine. You know, I had animation on my first slide, right?
Right.
So, you know, with the flower, and I was looking for something that was going to be striking, and you know, I looked for a while until I found something. You know, I'm thinking, how do I visualize mediocre to memorable? You know, so you just have to spend some time at it, and then I decided that I was going to do it with color. So that was the way that I was going to be able to do it. And I took a flower. This is just 2 flowers, one on top of the other, and I just fade this one out. So this is an exit fade. So when I click, it just disappears, and what's behind it shows. It's a simple animation. And so yes, I do look for something striking on my first slide.
And I thought it was really impactful when we were doing the dry run. I thought, oh, wow, that's really cool. How'd you do that? So I think that was really a good way of doing it. And
the second one is the same concept.
Right.
It's just the 2 things in front of each other.
Kristen has a question. What do you think of bullets flying in rather than having them all displayed on a slide?
Okay, so first of all, don't make them fly in. Flying in text is like, it'll give your audience a headache because they start watching the text as it comes in, and after a while people's eyes get strained and they get a headache. So don't give your audience a headache. Never make text fly in. Now, you could make text appear, and this is similar to what I did with this Boston University slide, okay? So it appears or it fades in, you know, but not flying in. Oh, I forgot this. I had this last one over. I never actually did that one, that last click. So this is about as fancy as you want to get with text animation. And you can do it with bulleted text. You know, I recommend converting it to a SmartArt, and if you want to animate it, then you're going to have to ungroup it and do it, but that's fine. Just never make it fly in from any direction.
I think that's good advice. I'm waiting for Superman to come flying in onto your slides.
Right, right. People really hate it. They really do. So.
What's the advice you would give on how do you choose the best picture? How do you figure out how to find a picture that really would represent well what you're trying to say?
Yeah, so I guess there's no one answer to that either. But you can do certain things. For example, let me just put in a new slide here. And let me right-click it. Oh, another thing I want to tell people, and I saw this from the layouts, is use the layouts. You know, people would use a layout like this, and then they would delete all the things and put in text boxes. So use the layouts. They're there for a purpose. So I'm going to use this title and content. They help make your slides more consistent. And I'm going to do so insert clip art here. So. And so sometimes you can do something like this. You're going to get some cheesy things here, but success, okay? So the Microsoft Office Clipart Gallery does have conceptual art, so that, you know, some kind of metaphor or something like that. But definitely think of ways to think of a metaphor that works. Oh, so here's a good example, right? So you want to achieve your goals. So I thought of a soccer goal type of thing. And so I guess I might have looked up goal and seen this, or I might have, you know, specifically had the idea. I don't really remember anymore. But you just have to think of different ways. After a while, you get, you know, practice in doing some of those things. So here's another one. I told Sharon how I did this. So I drew this on a piece of paper, and then I scanned it, and then I put it in, and then I made a shadow, and I rotated it a little bit, and that's how I got that picture. So certainly and it's pretty easy to do that kind of picture. So feel free to create your own and take your own photographs. Oh, another thing I really like to tell people is that if you're talking about real people, if it's appropriate, go and take their photograph. I had a client at the University of Buffalo, and she did training for scientists on the regulations that they had to follow for research relating to humans. There are federal regulations, and there are state regulations, and there are university regulations. And she was desperate because the stuff she talks about is not only boring, but the researchers really don't want to hear it. You know? And so she was talking about a committee that has to review their work. And so instead of making it a faceless committee and just like a circle in there, go get their photographs and put them on the slide so that people see that they're real people, and maybe they even know some of them. And so make it as personal as possible. So those are some of the suggestions I have.
So one of the questions is, are there copyright issues when using photos found somewhere other than clips?
Well, so these are clips, you know, what you're seeing on the right, the clipart gallery, and I think I've discussed some of that before. You can use Creative Commons on Flickr and other places. You can go to the Stock Exchange website. I would have to actually go there to
While you're doing that, one of the other things too to look at it, I use TinEye, which does reverse it. You put the picture in, it actually will show you what the copyright is and if it's even available.
Oh, cool, cool, very nice, very nice. So this is the site that I was talking about, and the URL is actually sxc.hu. I think I can push that through to to everybody.
I can put it on chat, so don't worry about it. I'll put it in chat for you.
Okay. Yeah, so there are really lots of options.
Great. Another question is, how do you add some subtle visual effects? You use some of the changes you made with the line. What other ways can you do the belly band? What other options would you suggest? And I'm going to make that the last question,
Okay.
and then we're going to thank everyone for coming.
Well, I'll show you one thing that I did and this was in one of the, if I can find it. Yes, here. Okay. So this is a cool effect here. Let me duplicate this slide. So what I did here was to ease in, this is like a photoshopping effect. I have a rectangle here. So let me show you what happens when I move that. Do you see how the edge of the picture is sharp?
Mm-hmm.
So what I have here is one of those gradients, transparency gradients that I told you about before. And so it goes from white, which is the background, solid, to transparent. And so when you put it over the image, it makes the image appear to fade in. Gives a nice look.
That is a nice look.
So that's my favorite one for that.
Any closing comments?
Yes, I do have closing comments because I have some more slides that close up on things. Let's see. So, okay, let me go back into slideshow view. I'm in the middle. I organize every year something called the Outstanding Presentations Workshop. It's given by, there are 8 sessions. They're all recorded, so even though it's half over, you can go back and listen to the old ones. It's $7 for all 8 sessions, which is just the deal of the century. And it has other Microsoft PowerPoint MVPs and of speaking on really topics that people want to know about. The one coming up is going to be on charts. There's going to be one on themes, so we've touched on both of those topics today. And we're really getting good results for it. So you can try that going to outstandingpresentationsworkshop.com. And then I want to tell you about the handout. I promised that. So the first thing is to get the handout with some of those detailed instructions that I mentioned. And if you have I have a QR code, so if you want to scan it, you can. And it'll bring you to this website, which I just registered 2 days ago. I'm having so much fun with it. It's called ellenhelps.me and then /px for Presentation Expert. And that will give you the page where you can get this handout. And this will be in the follow-up email. And at the same time, you can sign up for this free PowerPoint Tips newsletter and my ebook From Death by PowerPoint to Life by PowerPoint that comes when you sign up. And then the third thing is I'm giving everyone here 20% off slide design for non-designers for 2 weeks through November 7th. And I wanted to make that really specific because this is recording and people could be watching it any time. So it's just for those 2 weeks.
Terrific. I think this has been fabulous. I'm going to steal presenting rights back from you in a second, but I wanted to at least remind people that they'll get an invitation to you'll see check in your chat area, you'll see discussions, you'll see all sorts of stuff. I've put in the TinEye link, we've put in the stock exchange. We've also we'll be sending you invitations to our Ning group as well, so you can join and start joining the conversation, and Ellen has already started to hang out there. So that is terrific. I want to just say thank you so much, Ellen, for doing this. We really appreciate it, and you've just been terrific.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for coming. I was really pleased. By the way, I wanted to give a little shout out to those of you who I know already who are on my either attending the Outstanding Presentations Workshop or subscribers of mine. I know some of you joined, so hi to you. But I really also wanted to welcome all of you, and I hope that you found the concrete information that you can use to turn your presentations from mediocre to memorable.
Terrific. Thank you so much, and we wanted to say thank you to everybody and hope you have a great day.